Hey Oslam, let's look at some of these structures in your low back and kind of like get an idea of what's happening so we can kind of understand these exercises that are going to follow and what we need to avoid, what we need to do, why we need to avoid those things and do those things. Okay, so let's look. So here's a crude drawing of your low back, the structures in your lower back. These little points right here are kind of the areas that you can palpate. If you push on your own back, you can feel these little dots. If somebody bends over, you can see these little dots poking out. These are filled up with just tons of muscle all up and down. So this structure, as we go this way, this is all too deep to palpate. You wouldn't feel any of this. These are the bodies of your vertebrae, right? So these are hard bones. This is the disc right here, all of this stuff. This is the disc. All of them have this nucleus pulposus in the middle. This nucleus pulposus is like a jelly-like, spongy-like shock-absorbing structure all around the nucleus pulposus that surrounds it. Like if we were to take a strike through like this, and look at a transverse image from the top, it would look something like this. And here's the nucleus pulposus in the middle, this gooey, egg yolk-like, squishy kind of substance surrounded by these rings of fibrocartilage called the annulus of the disc. The annulus, its job is to hold the nucleus pulposus in the middle so that this can be a good shock absorber. When we injure our back from flexing forward or backward, here, zoom out to me really quick, Amanda. These vertebrae are stacked up on top of each other like this. In between those vertebrae are the discs, okay? When I lean forward like this, when I bend my back forward, my vertebrae are individually tilting forward like that. It puts pressure on the front of that disc, relieves pressure on the back. Just like if I had a jelly donut between my hands, it's gonna squirt the jelly material that way, okay? If I go into a really deep arch, okay, it's gonna put pressure on the back of the disc, relieve pressure on the front. That jelly-like nucleus pulposus is going to be pushed that way, okay? Now, coming back to the image, when we do something crazy, and as we get older, these tissues get easier and easier to damage. You can injure this tissue in here in various ways. You can get a transverse injury like this. You can get a circumferential tear in that annulus like that. Once you have a little tear in there, that disc material can then let's say we had a tear just like this. This disc material can now fill in this little tear, and it becomes more easy for this disc material to get pushed in that particular direction with those various kinds of loading movements of our spine. So now, if I do this with a tear in that disc material is going to travel quite a ways. If it travels far enough, especially this way, it's going to run into our spinal nerves, which are running in and throughout these canals back here in these little holes behind the disc. And if you could look at this once again from the top, you would see that our spinal canal runs back here, and here's like the vague shape of that vertebral column. These are these points, like these points here. That would be the point of that, right? So anyway, our spinal canal runs back here. If we had a tear, that nucleus pulposus could fill in that gap, put a little bulge out the back door, hit our spinal column, and all of a sudden we've got pain running down our legs. You know what I mean? Depending on where that tear is and where it's oriented, it could just hit one of the nerves that come out the side, out here. All kinds of ways this could happen. Now, there's two kinds of movement we can do with our back. Broadly speaking, there's more than two, but let's sum it up to two. There's loaded movements that we can do to our back, and there's unloaded movements. A loaded movement is anytime our spine is oriented vertically. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anytime my spine is oriented vertically, my spine is now loaded. Okay?
Thank you.
All of the weight from my upper body, all of that gravity is now pushing down on that disc material. Now, anytime that I flex or extend my spine, it's now a loaded flexion and extension. And imagine that jelly donut once again. If I put a little pressure on it and now extend or flex on it, now there's going to be pressure pushing that jelly material really forcefully, okay? So that's a loaded spinal movement. If I'm laying on my back or on my hands and knees, and my spine is horizontal, parallel to the ground. That now is now an unloaded spinal movement, and I can safely wiggle my spine about without exerting as much pressure on the disc, okay? So we come back in here to this image. Let's say, here's a fresh disc. Let's start over. This guy doesn't have any tears. Let's say we get a little bit of a tear. Okay, now that disc material is getting pushed around, it's kind of pushing this annulus around. Your body is gonna eventually send scar tissue in here, and it's gonna patch up this little tear, okay? That takes time, okay? And in the meantime, we have to make sure that we're not exerting pressure sending the disc material that way. So we need to do zero bending or flexing of our spine. Thank you so much, Kamoon. Zero flexing of our spine, which would result in that disc material traveling back here towards our spinal nerves. Okay, that's no good. We need to keep exerting pressure this way, which we'll do by extending our spine in unloaded positions so that we can keep that disc material centralized so the scar tissue can then go in there and repair this little nick that we've got in our annulus, okay? So we'll go in future videos, let's talk about how we do that exactly. Your job right now is to avoid loaded flexing of the spine. So no standing, let's come back to me. No standing up or even sitting down and flexing the spine right now. That's your worst enemy. That's gonna push that disc material in the wrong direction. It's gonna make it harder for that scar tissue to do its job and bind everything down. So keep moving really slow. It's too early for you to do extension movements, but just avoid flexing, keep moving slow for at least another week. There's a danger period because you're gonna start to feel kind of good, okay? But that's a lie. Your symptoms are gonna drop off and you're gonna be like, oh, it's safe to move again. No, it's not safe to move yet until scar tissue has gone in there and really wound up this tissue. And we'll talk about that, what that time looks like in a little bit, but for now, at least a week symptom-free before we need to start going into it and start stretching that material and getting a little tiny bit more active.
And does symptom-free mean no pain?
Symptom-free means like no pain, no radiating pain. It'll feel better than it is, okay? Scar tissue will have just started to do its job of holding that disc in place, but that scar tissue is still very brittle and easily re-injured, okay? Also, whenever we get a tear in any kind of tissue, when you get that first initial little bit of tear, it's like a tear in fabric. It's really easy to tear it more at that point, if that makes sense. You know how like when fabric is fresh and there's no tear, you can really tug on it and it's really durable? If there's a little tear in this and I put that same amount of force, that little tear turns into a big tear really easily, okay? And scar tissue, when it starts to form, is thin little baby fibers that can really easily be retorn with very little stress. So put zero stress on your back for a good little while. We need to be at least approaching a week symptom-free before we start putting deliberate stress on that scar tissue to help it heal in a really durable fashion.
So if she has a back brace, would that be helpful to help just remind her not to bend?
Whatever keeps you from donking or any worse. Like you need whatever reminder you need. Yeah, if a back brace helps you remember not to bend, fine, yeah.
Now it's our pancake break. Yay.